Good morning, everybody. You might want to turn your camera off because for some reason my focus mode button has disappeared. So I can't put it on student focus. There's something going on with my Zoom. And even my participant entry everything is looking different. And one of the buttons that is not available anymore is start focus mode. I don't know why. We're looking into why my Zoom looks the way it is. All right, so again, if you want to turn your camera off, otherwise you're going to be on screen with it for everybody to see. Also, and I'm taping, so you'll also be on the recording if you leave your camera on. Or you can turn your camera to the ceiling, and that'll be fine too. Today, you have permission to not be on camera. All right, I hope you're surviving this weather well. You all I had an emergency the other morning, and hopefully you all completed your um, serology lesson. Some of you still need to do that blood typing lab, but turn that in. We're moving on. We're still in serology. So if you go to, okay, excuse me. If you go to Canvas, we are on. Alrighty, there we go. Okay. All right, so so the activity that you did the components of the blood. We know we have red blood cells and white blood cells, and we have platelets. We have something called an Rh factor, and all of these are the proteins in the blood. Give me a minute, let me let these other folks in. All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. You might want to turn your camera off or turn it to the ceiling because my focus mode button is not working. So if you don't want to be seen by everybody, you want to turn your camera uh, off. Just for today, because we're still trying to figure out why my buttons are not working. Hey. All righty. Yeah, for some reason I have a whole new look to my Zoom where the chat and participants should be white, they're black. It's like it's in default mode or something. But we're gonna figure out what's wrong with it and fix it. But one of the things that is not offering me is, yes, it can be annoying. One of the things it's not offering me is the choice to put it in focus mode. It's giving me a whole new uh, arrangement on my more menu. I have transcripts, captions, record, breakout room. It's almost like I'm not the host, but I am. But we'll see. All right, serology. So we were talking about red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. So you have these proteins in your blood that we were looking at as far as the lab was concerned. And you either have an A protein, a B protein, or an Rh protein, or you have neither, or you have both. Okay, so type O means you have neither. Type O positive means you have neither the A nor the B, but you do have the Rh protein present. Okay, I'm still letting folks in. All right. Okay. So we're going, now that I got most people in, we're going to look at the second part 2. So there's 3 parts to the serology videos. So we're going to look at part 2 today, and then move on. All right, good morning, good morning. If you just logged in, my focus mode is not working, so if you wish to turn your camera to the ceiling, you can do that, or simply turn it off, because you will be on screen.
All right, so we are continuing on with our blood.
Oops. All right, so in a forensic situation, when you get shot or somebody cuts you or you're spreading blood all over the place, there's different ways that the blood will move. So that's what she's going to talk about today. And based on how the spatter is placed, they can determine the type of weapon, the distance, or even the type of person.
Evidence lesson. In lesson 1, we talked about serology and blood typing, and this is lesson 2 where we're talking about blood spatter and blood stain interpretation. So blood spatter or blood stain interpretation is a technique that seeks to piece together the events that caused bleeding at a crime scene. So it's sort of the physics spin on blood evidence. And you need to know that blood stains are not considered individual or class evidence. In fact, they're not really considered evidence at all. Now, the blood that makes up the blood stain is considered evidence, but the actual blood spatter itself more so tells the story of what took place at the crime scene that particular moment. So bloodstains are different than any of the other types of evidence that we've discussed so far in this unit. Fingerprints, DNA, fibers, hairs, all of those serve as evidence that points directly to a suspect or a group of suspects. But bloodstains serve as a story, a way for investigators to determine the events that surround that crime scene. So what's going to happen is blood stains or blood spatter is going to be left at a crime scene. Investigators are going to take a look at that, and then they are going to analyze those blood stains. And so these analysts can correlate the static blood stains at a crime scene with the dynamic forces that caused those blood stains. So they're going to look at types of blood stains like impact spatter, cast off spatter, transfer stains. They're going to look at the size of the blood stains, the shape of those blood stains to try to recreate the events that took place at that crime scene. This is also a way for investigators to confirm or disprove stories that come from suspects or witnesses. So there's a lot of physics involved. It takes a trained professional to read bloodstain patterns. And so we're just going to kind of hit the high points. So again, one of the first things that investigators do when they get to a crime scene and they're working with blood is they're first going to need to verify that that material is indeed blood. And remember, they do that with presumptive blood tests. So they're going to use a presumptive blood test to determine that they are indeed working with blood, and then they're going to start to analyze those blood stains. So in the actual spatter analysis, an investigator will determine trajectory of the blood, which is where the blood came from and how it spread over the surface. By measuring the shape of the blood stain on a surface, the direction of movement can be determined, as well as the speed that blood was traveling when it hit a surface. Both of those can be really important to recreating the story behind what happened or what took place at a crime scene. You can see here in these pictures, these are some different blood stains, and in some future lessons we're going to get into what these stains actually mean. But you can have passive stains, and then you can have velocity spatter. Those can be further classified as low velocity spatter, meaning that the blood was moving very slowly when it hit the surface, or medium velocity spatter, which means it was traveling a little bit faster. And then your high velocity spatter patterns are going to create these really tiny droplets that spread over a surface. Again, we're going to look at that in a future lesson, but you can see here in the pictures, different blood shapes and sizes can help recreate the events behind how that blood got on that surface. And a trained investigator is going to want to try to determine how that blood got on the surface, how fast it was moving, what object was used to create that pattern. You need to know that blood falls as spheres. You can see in the picture there that perfect sphere, which is why when we have what's called a passive drop, which means that the blood was drawn downward towards Earth's surface by gravity, because it forms that sphere on the way down, it's going to hit the surface at a 90-degree angle with a circular pattern. And then that pattern is going to have something called spikes and satellites that are going to help sort of tell the story. So drops do form these circles when they hit the surface, and that is basically due to the cohesion properties of blood. Now, the size of those blood drops depends on how fast it was going when it hit the surface. Again, we talked about that in the last slide. You can have a low velocity spatter, medium velocity spatter, or high velocity spatter. Now, as a general rule, the higher the energy of the impact, the smaller the drops are going to be. So you can see with the example of a gunshot spatter pattern, we call this a high energy blood stain or spatter pattern, and it's going to produce drops that are less than a millimeter in diameter, so really tiny drops. Then if you have a passive stain, those are going to be larger. Again, gravity pulled down on that drop. It was moving very slowly, fell at a 90-degree angle, and it's going to create more of a circular pattern. And those are going to be a little bit larger. All right, so general rule, the fastest that free-falling blood drops can travel is about 25 feet per second. So that is passive drop, falls at the hands of the force of gravity, and the fastest that it can travel when falling passively is 25 feet per second. Another rule to note is that blood always travels in the direction of the applied force. So I'm going to give you just a second to write this down. You want to put this in your notes. Blood's going to always travel in the direction of the applied force. You learn.
And I'm going to pause this so that you can write that down too. All right, so one, the velocity makes a difference as far as the type of pattern that you're going to see. And then the blood will always travel. In other words, if the force is going this way, the blood is going that way too. It's not going to fall behind you. The blood is going to fly in the direction of the force. Oops, sorry. There's a little. There we go.
All right, forensic students, we are starting the victim as a donor of a blood stain.
Oh, it went backwards. Hold on.
It's much cheaper.
There's a little pencil in front of my thing, so it's blocking my ability to.
Much less time consuming than DNA profiling. All right, forensic students, we are starting on
that's what I get for stopping it.
All right, forensic students, we are starting.
Yeah, I can get that part. Get there. And then it gets to the end. So I made a copy of that for you all last time, so make sure that you. All right, this is what I'm going to do. Because for some reason, that should not be the next one in your slide. Okay, we're having that kind of morning, aren't we? We were here.
All right, so we are continuing on with our blood evidence lesson. In lesson one, drops. Then if you have a passive stain, those
Not
are going to be
starting
larger.
anymore.
Again, gravity pulled down on that drop. It was moving very slowly, fell at a 90-degree angle, and it's going to create more of a circular pattern. And those are going to be a little bit larger. All right, so general rule, the fastest that free-falling blood drops can travel is about 25 feet per second. So that is past a drop, falls at the hands of the force of gravity, and the fastest that it can travel when falling passively is 25 feet per second. Another rule to note is that blood always travels in the direction of the applied force. So I'm going to give you just a second to write this down. You want to put this in your notes. Blood's going to always travel in the direction of the applied force. You learn this in physical science or physics. But I'm going to send you to another video to finish out this lesson because they can actually show you in the video some different examples of how patterns are created. Blood stain patterns are created at crime scenes. So they're going to walk you through passive stains versus velocity spatter. They're also going to walk you through the difference between impact spatter and cast off spatter, transfer stains, and what those look like. So what I want you to do is head over to YouTube, and I want you to search Wired put this out. I want you to search Forensic Expert Explains How to Analyze Bloodstain Patterns. It's a 17-minute video, but it does a really, really good job of showing how different patterns are created at a crime scene. So head over there now, watch that 17-minute video, and I will see you in the next lesson.
All right, I have to get that.
All right, we are finishing up
Okay.
our blood
Whoops.
evidence.
Okay, she's already moved on to the next one, so let me go back.
All right, so we are continuing on with our blood evidence lesson. In lesson one, we talked about serology and blood typing, and this is and I want you to search Wired put this out. I want you to search Forensic Expert Explains How to Analyze Bloodstain Patterns. It's a 17-minute video, but it does a really, really good job of showing how different patterns are created at a crime scene.
Okay, I'm gonna hold that right there. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute to do attendance. So while I'm doing that, I want you to look up. I'm gonna get the video for you, but what I want you to do is go back to, hold on, let me go back to sharing. Go back to the module, and I want you to I want you to look at the notes that they have on blood splatter. Mhm. Okay, my thing just froze, but this is where you need to be, the importance of serological evidence, and it's coming. It's coming. All right, so look at that, and here we go. All right, so I'm going to pull up that video that she was talking about, but I want you to know that you have that information also in Canvas, so please take a look at that. All right, so backing up just a little bit. If you haven't been reading Canvas, please take a moment to do that while I do attendance. But start from here, forensic importance of serological evidence, and then go on and look at the blood stain pattern lesson. Okay, all right, so read that over while I do attendance. Okay. Also, if you haven't turned in your virtual lab, that's due, it's past due. Head Start. All right. Give you just a few more minutes to read up, and then I will show the video that she referred to. Something with Whitney. All right, so like she said, it's a little bit long. It's 17 minutes long, but it's an interesting watch. I can keep that little pencil from getting in my way. Okay. Now he's muted.
He's explained crime scene forensics in Technique Critique.
So that's a really interesting yet very illegal way to. Today I'm going to show you how to analyze various bloodstain patterns.
In this episode, we'll learn the techniques forensics experts use to investigate bloodstain patterns, ranging from easy to difficult.
So normally when we go to a crime scene, it's not set up like this, unless we have some sort of Dexter-esque crime scene where the killer really planned it out. Today we're doing on set for safety purposes. For us at crime scenes, when we investigate them, safety is number one. We want to protect ourselves. I think we have various bloodborne pathogens that we're dealing with. And secondly, we don't want.
I show this because we don't get to do lab work. So one of the ways that you experience lab work is to watch something like this, a demonstration like this.
Want to contaminate the crime scene. So we don't want the hairs and fibers on ourselves, the DNA that's shedding off us, falling onto our evidence. At a crime scene, we'd wear multiple layers of gloves if we're going to be handling evidence, and then we'd want to wear eye protection if there's like a splash hazard with blood that hasn't been dried. So our Tyvek suit covers most of our body, including our feet, because we wouldn't want to be introducing our shoe wear impressions into a crime scene or destroying evidence that's there. So normally I'd be wearing a mask, but I don't think it's a really good look for talking on camera. Next, we're going to talk about the three main categories of bloodstains that we can encounter at a crime scene.
You, just you, building your app on base 44. Describe.
Today, we're going to be using defibrinated sheep's blood. We have taken the fibrin out of this blood. Fibrin is a protein that's in our plasma that causes our blood to clot. So if we use regular whole blood that had the fibrin in it, we'd have a clotted mess inside this bottle. Bloodstain pattern analysts correlate the appearance of these bloodstain patterns at a crime scene to a mechanism by which they were created. It isn't a crystal ball. It isn't like the way TV presents it, where a crime scene investigator walks into a scene and could tell you every single action that happened inside that crime scene from beginning to end. Analysts can correlate the static bloodstains at a crime scene with dynamic forces that create them. So what we look at is specific stain patterns, and we could figure out how they possibly were created, and then with that, we could show a small window of time. Not the whole crime, but that this type of force could have created this sort of pattern. So passive patterns are patterns that are created without any sort of outside external force other than gravity or contact. So we're going to first start off with dropping blood at 90 degrees to see what we get. So I'm going to take a pipette and a small amount of blood and hold it directly above and drop it. So when our sphere of blood strikes the surface at 90 degrees, we have a very even, round circle at a crime scene. But also what affects the way our bloodstain looks is the surface itself. We have plexiglass, and we notice that the edge characteristics of our bloodstain are very even. Now that we observe the way that blood acts on a smooth surface, let's try tile, which has a little bit of texture to it. One drop of blood, straight down onto a different surface now. You could see a little bit of scalloping around the edges there. That's because of the surface texture. So the scalloping is just the different ways that we describe the edge characteristics of bloodstains. So it could be smooth, uniform, it could be scalloped, or it could be spiny. So now we change the surface to a rougher surface, wood. So we can see a vast difference from where we started, where we had smooth edge characteristics. Now we have this spinier pattern because that blood drop is being disrupted by the surface itself. And we can also see we have some satellite stains. Satellite stains are stains that come off a parent stain. So this main stain here is my parent stain. In this case, because of the disruption, they are being forced out from the center of it. We also see satellite spatter when blood is being dripped into blood. Typically at a crime scene, especially with stabbings, we want to look for these drip patterns. It could be that the suspect accidentally cuts themselves and they're moving around a crime scene and fleeing the crime scene, and they could leave blood trails that we could follow. Next, we're going to be looking at contact transfer stains. A transfer pattern is a passive pattern where we have a bloody surface coming in contact with another surface. And then sometimes we could actually figure out what made that transfer, whether it was a hand, or a weapon or someone's clothing. I mean, that's the best type of evidence that we could have at a crime scene. We have the victim's blood and we have the suspect's impression. There's very few explanations of how that happens. So we're gonna start off with a shoe wear impression in blood. So this could be our victim walking through blood, creating patterns in our crime scene, or this could be the suspect's shoe wear impression. We're gonna coat the bottom of the shoe and we're gonna transfer the pattern of the bottom of the shoe to our clean surface. So I have my shoe wear that's completely coated in blood, and then inside that crime scene, we have a transfer of that pattern. And we'll notice is that that pattern gets lighter and lighter as we move along. What we don't see with our naked eye, we could find later on with chemicals like luminol or blue star. So we could see a continuation of that pattern as someone walks away from a crime scene. Sometimes we see transfer patterns in textiles. So next we're gonna take some blood, saturate a portion of our jeans with it, and we're gonna transfer that onto our surface. So sometimes in real crime scenes, these get misinterpreted as the lines of minutia in your fingerprints or a palm print. What we would see is that unlike fingerprints, they're just straight lines. Either way, we would document this and collect it and send it to the lab, and then under magnification, analyze it. So next we're gonna discuss how movement could affect these transfer stain patterns. So I'm gonna take some blood and put it onto my hand and then move that across the surface. So if I touch the surface and then move my hand, we see what's called feathering. The effect of movement on blood, just like if I took a paintbrush and moved it across a wall, in the beginning it would be darker, but eventually it would get lighter. So this feathering effect helps us interpret movement at a crime scene. This could be found at a crime scene in many different ways. One could be a suspect has blood on their hands and they move it across a clean surface. And another very common way that we see these patterns at a crime scene are what's called drag marks. We have a victim that's bleeding and either they're moving through the scene or someone's dragging them through the scene. And we'd see the same effect, that feathering going towards the body. Next, we're gonna cover flow patterns, and that is a volume of blood being affected by gravity. So we can see here is that gravity is pulling upon that blood and pulling it down on our surface. At crime scenes, this may be very valuable evidence when we observe our victim's injuries. A person had an injury to their shoulder. If they're standing or if their body is erect, that flow pattern should go straight down their arm. But if they've been moved or there's movement or that injury was caused when they were laying down, we'd see a different flow pattern. So next we're gonna discuss saturation and pooling patterns that we'd have at a crime scene.
And the girls win. Come on, boys.
When it thrills, protects, and connects.
Saturation and pooling patterns could tell us that someone is bleeding in a certain part in a crime scene for a period of time. You know, sometimes when we see bubbles at a scene, that could mean that we have a expirated pattern or a pattern that's coming from an airway. But let's pop those because we don't want. But what this could tell me is that we had accumulation of blood there and that there's been no movement, because if this happened and then we moved the shirt, we would see that the blood would move in that direction. Typically we'll see this on mattresses or beds or bedding, and then it would absorb a little more. So now we're gonna have an accumulation of blood on a non-porous surface and we'll see pooling. So pooling and saturation, it's the same mechanism that we're looking at, just the accumulation of blood. But with pooling, the blood is not being absorbed into the surface. For pools of blood, what we'll see with actual whole blood that has fibrin in it, they will dry a lot slower than it would in something that's absorbent, but also we're gonna see over a period of time is clotting inside that pool. And then sometimes we'll see affect what's called serum separation. So the edges of this will be clear where we see the plasma of the blood as it separates. So now we're moving on to the spatter category of bloodstain pattern analysis. With this category of bloodstains, we're looking at some sort of external force on an open source of blood. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a small amount of blood on our wood here. I'm gonna strike it with a hammer, and what we should see is an impact spatter on the plexiglass in front of us. Put on my goggles. I'm gonna put my hood up. Give us a small amount of blood here. All right, ready? There we go. So as you can see, not only do we have impact spatter on the plexiglass in front of us, we also have it on our suspect here. Okay, so we applied force to an open source of blood, and we have a resulting impact stain. our stain pattern, what we'll notice is directly opposite where the force was applied, we have our blood striking that surface at 90 degrees. So these stains that we have right here near the bottom are circular. But the further we move away from that source, these blood stains are now hitting this surface at an angle. So our stains are more elliptical. Bludgeoning would be the most common way that we get these stains, but it could be that we have the force of a bullet passing through somebody. So we have a phenomenon called forward spatter and back spatter. So if someone is shot and a bullet passes through, say, their shoulder, we have blood going in the direction of the force, so with the bullet out of the exit. But we also have blood going the opposition of the force, and that's what we call back spatter. First off, we started by creating different patterns that we could analyze. Next step, we're gonna look at something a little more difficult. Next we do is calculate the area of convergence. That's a two-dimensional area on our surface. If we draw a line through the long axis of several stains where all these lines will meet, they should converge in an area somewhere in the center here. What I wanna do is pick several stains that are elliptical from different sides of the pattern. We're looking at this to solve where this blood came from. I'm gonna start with this stain here, and I'm going to line up so that I'm drawing a line through the long axis of my stain. So this is where the tail is gonna help me out to figure out the directionality, but also to line up my ruler. And then sometimes what we'll do is just kind of show, for a jury, an arrow the direction that stain was going. So then I'll move around the pattern from different sides of it and draw through different stains. So this isn't done at every crime scene, but when we have a pattern like this, we have elliptical stains along the outside, and we have some circular stains towards the inside. This is the perfect opportunity for us to do some analysis. I could keep going and draw more lines through more stains, and it should all be coming back to the same general direction. So if this was on the wall and this was very low, this could be very powerful evidence to show that, that was low to the ground where this impact happened. Since we identified different stains that are striking our surface at different angles, we're gonna figure out the angle of impact that these stains hit our surface. We do that by measuring the length of the stain, we divide it into the width of the stain, and the arc sine of that number will give us our angle of impact. So we're measuring stains, we always want to use millimeters, allows us for smaller measurements. So what we could also use is a digital caliper, and that will give us precise sub-millimeter measurements. So I want to measure the length of the stain, the long axis of the stain. So this is 3.1 millimeters. And then I'd measure the width of it. So I'm measuring the widest part of the stain. That's 1.7 millimeters. We're going to divide 3.1 into 1.7. So if we do the arc sine of that number, that will give us the angle of impact, which is 33.25. If you had a regular ruler, you would just have to round up to the closest millimeter. So in this case, this stain is 4 millimeters. And then we measure the width of it. It is 2 millimeters. So we would divide.
If you're taking anatomy and physiology for the first time, I can guarantee it's not like any course that you've ever taken. And that's why so many students struggle with it.
It's hard.
4 into 2, which gives us 0.5. And the arc sine of 0.5 is 30 degrees. And we can see it's basically at the same distance from our center, but just on the other side. If we look at this two-dimensionally, we know that these lines of our area of convergence meet here. But if I want to think about it three-dimensionally, that my blood is coming from somewhere above it here. So the next step will be is that we're going to calculate the area of origin. If it's coming in at a right angle here, I have a triangle. So this will be my adjacent side of the triangle. I know that it's 90 degrees from here. So that's my right triangle. And then this side that the path takes is the hypotenuse of the triangle. And so if I know the distance from my stain to my area of convergence, and I want to figure out how far away my area of origin is here in space, if I do the tangent of that, I could figure out the side, like SOHCAHTOA. When we analyze bloodstains in a field, I always feel it's better to do all these methods. We should be coming up with similar results, but if you messed up somewhere, one of those is going to be correct. Next up, we're going to try something a little more difficult, interpreting relationships. There's an adage that forensic science is the art of observation governed by science. So we have observed our stain patterns at our crime scene, and we're going to interpret how these possibly were created. So if I go to a crime scene and I see that there's some clothing there, eventually I'm going to recover this. But after I recover it and I see that there's passive stains underneath it, I know that this came after this, that this wasn't in place, that this was placed afterwards. And if I don't see a transfer of blood on here, it could be that this was already dry by the time this clothing went on top of it. So now we're looking at a passive drip pattern. This could be the victim's blood, this could be the suspect's blood. We won't know until we sample it and send it off for analysis. What we can interpret from this could be movement. So if this trail of blood is leading away from the scene, we would see those tails going in a direction of travel. Now we're looking at a white pattern. We have a pre-existing stain that something came in contact and moved through it. So we could see from our discussion earlier of feathering that the directionality is coming towards me. Something is passively dripping blood. That could be a weapon, that could be a victim, that could be our suspect, and then something later on comes through it. That could be someone trying to clean up this stain. This could also be that maybe someone was dragged through this or there was some sort of movement through that stain. So that was a white pattern. Now we have a swipe pattern. Blood is on something here, and we could see, again, that same feathering going in the direction of travel. We have a transfer pattern with movement, which is a swipe pattern. There's blood on something, and then we're just moving that in a direction. Usually when it's a white pattern, we could see those original stains. So they're drying, and then someone tries to wipe them off with a cloth. Now we're looking at a cast-off pattern. So this is a subcategory of spatter. That's a projection mechanism. So blood is on an object, and we're moving that object in space. That could be someone's hand, that could be a pipe, that could be a bat, that could be a knife. And as that object moves, blood will be flung off it, and we have these very distinct linear patterns or curvy linear patterns. At a crime scene, if we see these cast-off patterns, they can go up the walls, they can go across the floor, and even onto the ceiling. So we're looking at a spatter pattern, but we have a normally continuous drops of blood that are being interrupted or blocked by something. And that gives us a pattern, what's called a void. Sometimes we have crime scenes where there's something important that would be in that pool or in that pattern or that spatter pattern, and it's been removed. So it could be someone's bag or a cell phone, their wallet. I had a crime scene where someone was bludgeoned, and adjacent to his head was the complete absence of blood spatter. Looking to the left of him, there was a spatter pattern that didn't line up. What we determined was that the curtains inside of the hotel room were open at the time of the crime and then closed later on. We've gone over how these patterns are created, our different categories of patterns, and what we can interpret from these patterns at a crime scene. This is not a simple process. This stuff takes time, training, and experience. And beyond that, there's no absolutes with any of this. There's no one specific answer, then it's only that one answer. I hope you guys learned a lot.
So I want you to go back to the module. And finish up reading. And again, those of you who have not finished your submission of your virtual lab, please make sure that you do that because it's late now. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are, so these are the patterns that he mentioned: cast off, swipe, expiratory, and transfer. So he discussed all of those. He talked about convergence angles and angle of impact. All right, so take a minute to go through and reread all of those because I know that was a lot of information. And we'll talk about this next time. Okay, this is similar to the chart I sent you all out earlier when we were doing the lab. Okay. All right, so we worry about that one next time. Right now, just worry about this one. Read this page over, and again, make sure. And I do believe I put the video in the list, so if you need to go back and look at that, Again, at some point we will. We only have, look at the module. We only have 2 more. Okay, so we're here with blood stains. We only have 2 more, actually 1 more unit, and then we'll be finished. So that means before we go on break, we will, and break is next Friday. So probably by next Friday, we'll be testing serology, so that when we come back with them, we'll just do DNA analysis when you come back. So our objective is to finish this and test it next Friday. Okay. All righty. All right. So read. And again, make sure that you are turning in the lab if you haven't already done so. Okay, I have adjusted the attendance. So those of you who came in late, I got you. And again, the virtual lab is the first grade of the new 9 weeks. So some of you have a 0 at the moment, so please correct that. We're going to make sure that this 9 weeks, we're not going to end up at the finish line and say, oh, I need to make up some work. We're trying not to do that. We're going to try to stay current all the way to the end. In actuality, we were off on Monday, and this was due on Monday. Because we were off, I'll go ahead and change the due date to today. So if you turn it in today, it's not late. But after today, it will be marked late. Okay. All right, so it might have a 0 in it at the moment, and that 0 will stay if you don't get it fixed today. At least. It's not in this class. Computer's acting up.